Top 10 Worst 70s Doctor Who Stories. Gentle viewer, hello and welcome to the first in a light-hearted new series looking at the great turkeys of Doctor Who history, as perceived by yours truly. Given that 70s Who is generally regarded by most Who fans, at least those Who fans who bother watching anything prior to 2005 anyway, as the best decade of Who, it seems perverse and thus fun to kick off the series with the worst of this grandiose time. I don't necessarily disagree with that assessment, by the way, though really I love the 60s and 80s too and have trouble really finding much in the way of difference to tell you the truth. And yes, I could have started with the 2000s or even a premature worst of 2010s vid, but then a top 10 list just wouldn't cover their list of atrocities and crimes against television, and I don't want to be here all week making this. The 70s were the time of Jon Pertwee and Tom Baker, of Barry Letts, Terrance Dicks, Philip Hinchcliffe, Robert Holmes, Graham Williams and Douglas Adams, so it's unsurprising it's such a kick-ass period of the show. But even the best of times have their dark moments, so here we have my own particular, personal and no doubt highly triggering choice of the top 10 worst stories from 70s Doctor Who. 10. Planet of the Daleks. Season 10 is a pretty great anniversary season, but this 6-part cure for insomnia is derrination at his laziest mixed with an ultra-cheapo production and equally lazy, uninspired direction. Very, very, very boring, so much so that even Jon Pertwee looks like he's acting while asleep. 9. The Brain of Morbius. This inexplicably overrated pile of tripe is highly popular with that peculiar breed of 70s fanboy who believes with the fervor of the most ready to sacrifice a human being at the first sign of rain religious fanatic imaginable that seasons 12 to 14 are utterly perfect, but everything else is worthless shit, despite this one actually being a pile of worthless shit itself. An utterly nonsensical plot, with a genius scientist villain so utterly stupid that he doesn't think of just transporting Morbius's brain into the Doctor's head while it's still on his normal body but instead prefers the idea of cutting off the Doctor's head and then grafting it onto a mutant hodgepodge of a body instead. A deep, profound sense of boredom and those nails down on a blackboard fucking irritating sisterhood make this a loser for me. 8. Death to the Daleks. Another inexplicably popular with some 70s Daleks story. This is slightly less lazy than Planet of the Daleks, but Terry Nation still seems to lose interest in a promising setup the moment he actually remembers he's supposed to be writing a Dalek story, and even some quite atmospheric direction in the first episode is utterly ruined by the completely hideous Carey Blyton incidental music. It's not the first or last time the Blighter does this, either. 7. Revenge of the Cybermen. What did I just fucking say? Carey Blyter is back again to remove any possibility of tension from any scene in any story with his excruciating idea of music, but this one is shit anyway, with a comical parade of Cybermen and a deeply stupid script. 6. The Demons. Oh man. This is another of those stories whose popularity is genuinely mystifying. Look, I get that the cast really enjoyed their working holiday making this, and cast rosy glow on it every time they talked about it at conventions in the 80s et al., but it's still poorly written, ineptly made and tension-free shite, now isn't it? Yes, it is. 5. The Android Invasion. Oh dear, with its third story in the list I guess the Hinchcliffe era isn't perfect after all. This one starts off okay, with a fairly interesting and spooky opening episode, but quickly descends into utter silliness and tedium. By the last episode I am losing the will to live and looking into the possibility of self-harm just in order to keep myself awake. 4. The Claws of Axos. The first true turkey of the Jon Pertwee era, this poorly made and garish mess is a disaster from script to performances to production and everything else you can possibly think of. The treatment of Jo is perhaps the most egregiously what the fuck, as the naive but capable girl of terror of the Autons and the already increasingly competent and mature agent of mind of evil regresses into a hysterical, shrieking 6-year-old who can't be left alone for 5 minutes left she go and burn the house down by playing with fucking matches. Truly diabolical. 3. The Mutants. One of the two big nadirs of the Pertwee era, The Mutants has a moderately interesting idea buried in it somewhere, probably up its ass or something, but is so tedious, padded, badly acted and hideously made, garish 70s CSO a go-go, that it's impossible to get past episode 1, let alone make it to episode 6. Just wait to see Jeffrey Palmer get shot and call it a day, is my advice. 2. Underworld. The Graham Williams era was pretty golden, possibly the great golden age of Who along with the Verity Lambert and Andrew Cartmel eras, but it still wasn't 100% perfect, as this season 15 horror story shows. I don't mean horror as in scary so much as in just horrifically dull. The back projection used on 2/3 of the story for budget reasons is unwatchable, but then so are the script and guest actors. Even Tom Baker appears to have lost the will to participate and is clearly just looking forward to going down the pub throughout. One can hardly blame him. 1. Genesis of the Daleks. This overrated pile of shite is, no, wait. Just kidding. Ha 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 ha. Had you fucking going there for a minute, didn't I? You should have seen your face, tee-hee. No. I think Genesis is a bit overrated myself, but it's not on my worst list, and certainly not number 1. So, hilarious wacky trolling aside, what is the worst single story of 70s Doctor Who can only be, of course, The Time Monster. Holy fuck, this is bad. I mean new series bad, Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies season finale bad. The Time Monster actually has, unbelievably, some support from hardcore Pertwee nuts, but don't be fooled. This is shite of the highest order. I mean, show some fucking objectivity, lads. I'm a hardcore 7th Doctor fan, but even I can admit Time and the Rani is fucking shite. The Time Monster is 6 episodes of embarrassing overacting, seriously shite writing and characterization, and a production so comically inept it looks like a 6th form drama production televised to the nation. The Time Monster is the worst Pertwee, the worst story of the 1970s and a prime candidate for the worst story of all of classic Who. It's still not as bad as 75% of New Pooh, of course, but that's a different program entirely, as I'm sure you'll agree. Next time, the top 10 worst 2000s stories. Oh shit,